Well, hello and welcome to today's panel discussion on social selling. My name is Peter Mullins, and today we'll discuss one of the most influential topics in modern selling. And what that is how to use social selling techniques both at an individual level as well as social selling strategies at more of an organizational level to help your team to sell more effectively. And I'm really excited because we've brought together a great set of panelists for today's event. I'm joined by two thought leaders that have been both skilled practitioners as well as thought leaders in the space for years. So I'd like to welcome Scott Luttrell. Scott is the sales manager for new business development at ZoomInfo, and there he manages a dynamic, growing team of salespeople that have seen an average of 60% year-over-year growth. And he also is actually the head of the only satellite sales office at ZoomInfo, so has a lot of great perspective. So first off, Scott, welcome.
Peter, glad I could join. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm also joined by Adam Hutchinson, who's the marketing manager at Cecedo. And Cecedo provides automated lead generation at scale through social media. There, Adam is responsible for improving Cecedo's customers' journeys, and he heads up the demand generation team and liaises with the sales organization to help them with their own social selling efforts. So, Adam, welcome to you as well.
Great. Thanks, Peter. Great to be here with so many people today.
Great. Absolutely. So before we hit off on the discussion, what I'd like to do is just set up a bit of context for why we're discussing social selling in the first place. And I think this one really encompasses the reason why. There's been some absolutely stunning numbers on the effectiveness of social selling, and the one that in particular that caught my attention was on the results at the team level. So we're seeing that teams that use social selling are about a third more likely to hit quota than their peers. And that's particularly stunning because it's at the team level. So individual rep effectiveness really is averaged out across that data set. With that in mind, let's look at why we need to evolve how we sell. Really, buyers are under more pressure than ever, and they simply have less time to devote to adding or managing new products. So as a result, they're increasingly ignoring outreaches from salespeople. So challenging the status quo becomes more important than ever, and because even though it hurts to say it, we as vendors are likely not the first or last thing that our prospects think about each day. They likely have a stack of priorities well ahead of the potential project that you're selling. So it's primarily due to those priorities, and your prospects may feel that other priorities are greater than what you're proposing, in which case you need to help demonstrate why the challenge that you're addressing deserves to be a priority. But the reality is that just a fraction of salespeople actually do add value to their buyers. So as you can see from this one stat in particular, only about 20% of salespeople actually add value to their buyers. So it's no wonder that increasingly buyers are just simply ignoring the input of salespeople that are contacting them. And that loss of access to the buyer is also coupled with another major shift, and that's the increased risk aversion at companies. A great resource on this topic that I like to refer to is the Challenger Customer from the CEB. And what they did was they looked at how difficult it is for salespeople to get attention from prospects. And in fact, now it requires about 6 people to agree to a B2B solution before a sale can actually proceed. Now, not to be outdone, 4Quadrant actually identified that it's about 20 people that need to nod their head in agreement for a standard B2B agreement to proceed at all. So, a lot of internal selling needs to be done. A lot of folks within organizations that need to find out about your solution, find out about the business problem in order to determine whether or not they want to advance. So that means that salespeople need to engage with prospects, identify pains in those accounts, and they need to build coalitions of support across that decision-making committee. And that's just not easy. It requires a direct support from salespeople to their prospects to help build a business case for change of their prospects. So with that as some of the context, I'd like to just go ahead and actually jump in. So with Scott and Adam on the line, why don't we begin with something that seems kind of innocuous, but actually is kind of controversial, and that's just simply the definition. So Adam, if you don't mind me starting with you, how would you define social selling?
Yeah, well, not to oversimplify this, but really to me, social selling is at the end of the day selling, where it's just opening up a new channel for us to be able to engage with our audience. And the key advantage to social here is it's where your leads already are. The average U.S. person spends about 2 hours a day on social media, and that's all the way from ages 18 up to 65. So it's pretty ubiquitous now in terms of people's use on social. And also around 66% of buyers actually do want to interact with brands on social. So the interest is there. People are spending time there. there's no reason why a salesperson shouldn't be there engaging with people. So at the end of the day, social selling isn't anything new. We just need to translate the same ideas of connecting with people, building trust, building a relationship, adding value prior to the sales conversation on social media. And of course, the key advantage to social as well is it's an open platform, so it's something we can start to do with scale. Once you start interacting with one lead on social media and you get responses, that's all public on social media. So all of a sudden you start to build up your own cloud as well, and you can get in front of other prospects at the same time. So while social media offers some kind of unique engagement opportunities, you have to be a little bit lighter. You can't jump into a sales pitch right away. You need to build trust over a longer period of time. Really, it's just another channel for you to reach out to your prospects on.
Okay, great. Now, Scott, interested in your perspective as a practitioner, you have an opportunity to do a lot of experimentation and the like in your role as a sales leader at a satellite sales office. How do you define it, and how do you describe it to your team?
Yeah, and I love something that Adam said. Adam said it is still just selling. So I won't say social selling is selling on social networks. It's really just using information that's just so easily available to be relevant to your prospects, to your potential buyers. There's so much information out there that you can just gather so quickly, and by doing that, you're going to earn instant credibility, instant trust, where 10 years ago this kind of information wasn't available. So we have a real huge advantage compared to where we were 10 years ago, and we should be using it. So I would just say using what's available to build trust, establish a relationship. And I think we look at social selling, I'd say the vast majority is done to open up doors. It's not really something that you're going to do along the way. I just think it's a great way to open up conversations quicker, more efficiently.
Right. So in a way, it sounds like that's good selling, isn't it? Like the practice that we've been trying to do for decades. So how do you think you differentiate between social selling and simply good selling, where you're being a resource for your buyers?
I think there is a difference. I think good selling is what happens after that initial conversation. I think social selling is almost what happens before. You use what you have available to build trust, gain credibility, learn about them, learn about their company. Good selling is how you really navigate after the fact, how you match your products and services to what's actually facing the prospect, what kind of challenges they're facing. So I'd say good selling is almost after the fact, and social selling is what happens before.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. One of the things that you had mentioned, Adam, in your introduction was about the importance of social media. I think that's one of the areas where people tend to get tripped up when they're thinking about what social selling is. So how would you differentiate between social media and social selling itself?
Well, sure. I mean, there are a couple of differences to it, of course. I mean, social selling in the broad aspect is right there in the name. It's social. It's how we interact with people through different mediums, online, even in person to an extent. Social media is really something that began in the marketing world, right? Social media itself, Twitter's only been around since 2008, Facebook since 2006, but social media marketing's only really existed since around 2010. So it's something that brands are starting to pick up on in terms of from a marketing standpoint, and now it's slowly starting to transition into selling. Really, social selling from a standpoint, it's been around forever, and that's the aspect of, hey, start a conversation, a relationship with people through whatever medium it might be. And we know the average buyer likes to be touched by about 10 times on 4 different channels before they even start a conversation. So that's the social aspect of it. Get to know people, use the data that's out there, connect with them on what they're talking about in real time. And often social media is a subset of that. And the brands who are doing it effectively, they've already started doing some social media marketing. And now it's how do we connect those things to the salespeople so the sales teams can have one-to-one interactions with their leads through multiple channels.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because social media really is the tool, is a tool, and social selling can be done in a variety of different ways, which could be through the phone, it could be in person, but social media, as you mentioned earlier, lets you do that at scale, that kind of pre-sale value add or trust building, lets you do that in a much more personalized but automated way to larger volumes of people. Well, great. So that's That's terrific for the definitional side of things. Well, let's start kind of jumping into getting more tactical and execution wise. I think one of the promise benefits that I see around social selling is that salespeople can now focus their efforts down to prospects that matter, prospects that are interesting for them, rather than having to be distracted by prospects that maybe aren't a great fit or not a great fit right now. And, so this one stat here, I think, really calls that out, where top sellers focusing their effort on the kinds of people that make sense. Adam, let me start with you. When you are looking for the right kind of folks to target, what kind of approaches do you take, or what signals are you looking for?
Sure. I mean, there's the general demographic information that everyone has in their business. Who is my target customer that I should be going after, and that I should be setting up for my sales team. And this is something that I work with our sales team a lot in. We kind of create those definitions. Whether it's company size, marketing platform used, obviously location, job titles, industry, all of those types of things. And then a subset of that is, what kind of breadth do we have within an organization? As you mentioned at the beginning, it can take up to 20 people to make a B2B buying decision. So do we have all of our bases covered? Do we have the managers as well as the day-to-day users of our products? But that's only a piece of it, right? What I really care about when I'm looking for these target prospect lists are those real-time indicators of interest as well. And often that's how much are they interested in me, but also in relative kind of tangential pieces of information. So, are they engaged with the right kind of topics, either online or in person? Are they coming to the right events that I'm also going to be at? Are they talking about, relevant keywords and influencers on social media? Are they connecting with my peers? Are they actually related to people that I know on LinkedIn, right? All of those types of indicators of interest are things that I look for when we're building out our target list, because the people who are already engaged with my industry are the ones who are going to move faster through the buying cycle. And so that's really how we start to filter down here at Socito, at least, to get to highly targeted prospect outreach.
Yeah, and Scott, I'd be interested in your perspective, because one of the things that we find is that you may have 100, let's say you have 100 prospects, 95 of those may not be in market at the right time, and you're looking for signals that are going to indicate that they're a good match right now. Now, ZoomInfo, of course, legendary access to information. So I'd be curious about some of the best practices that you and your team do there for identifying the right prospects.
Yeah, and I think if you have the indicators that Adam was talking about, that's obviously, those are the highest value prospects you can possibly reach out to. But sometimes it is just a matter of reaching out to people cold and sending them content, even if the timing's not right, telling them about a problem that they don't have. So, and honestly, like for us, we're a data provider. We have really good data, direct dials, email addresses on business professionals. But still, it's still really hard for us to figure out the best buyer sometimes, because a job title that we may look for will be marketing manager. But we can't tell if we're looking at a large company, does that marketing manager control social media, advertising, or are they working in marketing automation? And that's really a big indicator for us. So like the way we're going to use social media for our prospecting efforts and building out our targeted list is going in and looking for certain keywords or certain indicator within a person's background, especially on the marketing side, like Marketo or Eloqua. The marketing automation tool that they use is going to be a really good indicator of how good of a prospect that could potentially be. And then the other thing we look for are attributes. Like, is it a B2B company? Do they have a lot of sales reps that they need to support? Because that's usually someone that needs to drive a lot of leads. So these are all the things that we're going to look for within our tool, for the basics, and then some other tools just to find go a step further.
Yeah, that seems to be a big thing, isn't it? That segmentation, because clearly, a salesperson is not going to be able to, there's going to be tools that can help them to scale, but for personalized type communication, it's going to be difficult unless you have some kind of segmentation in place. So very interesting to hear about you using technology indicators, what their tech stack looks like in order to determine, how you want to segment messaging or segment the prioritization. Adam, are you using any kind of segmentation there as well to help salespeople define cohorts so that they can reach out to people in consistent ways?
Yeah, actually very similar to what Scott mentioned. So what we're doing, we have separate cadences within our sales team in terms of their outreach flows. based off of some of those indicators. So people who are using Marketo get a very kind of different sales outreach to people who are using HubSpot or Pardot or other marketing automation systems, since we're a tool that plugs into those. Obviously, industry makes a huge difference as well. We don't want to send someone, a case study from an HR recruiting industry if they're coming in from, software development or something like that. So those are kind of our main ones, industry and marketing platform use, and of course company size makes a huge difference as well. But then, what Scott mentioned as well about those kind of behavioral triggers too, what are people talking about, what are those keywords? I mean, I think that's huge, right? Even if we come in and someone, we don't necessarily know their industry, we don't know that they're using a marketing automation system, but hey, they're connected with Marketo on Twitter and they're talking about it on one of their social channels, and maybe, they even went to a conference and attended one of those Marketo sessions, something like that. Those are all indicators to me to say, hey, this is someone who's probably using Marketo, or at least very interested in those types of solutions. So those are the kind of indicators that we try to pull out in order to create those segments.
Okay, great. All right, so it sounds like I'm going to pause on this section here because it sounds like we have a good rule in place, which really is starting off with identifying who are the people that you want to talk to, segment those so that you have consistent messages across that. So sort of first rule, I guess, that we've come up with from this discussion. But kind of moving on now, I guess, to next stat here that I think is particularly important. It really comes back to that idea around value and communicating value out to your prospects. So when you have that about 2/3 of buyers are directly impacted by information that's shared by the seller, I mean, that's a huge number. What that really means is salespeople need to be able to add value to their conversations. And so, I don't know, do you see this, Scott, when you're talking with your buyers, that they're looking for ways to justify budget internally, or they're looking for how to build a business case?
I mean, of course. Yeah, I mean, like, they're going to certainly have to understand what you do, what you have before they're going to make any sort of decision.
And are you the provider of that information, or is it more they're off? I think there's the classic stat about supposedly people disappearing and doing the research on their own, which of course they do, but to what degree are your salespeople still guiding that process and influencing that?
Well, I mean, a lot of it is done up front without any sort of feedback from the potential buyer. Like sometimes we're throwing content out to our potential prospects because, based on all the indicators, we understand that, hey, this person's probably a good fit. And we keep on sending it, and sometimes we get hits, and sometimes we get hits right away where they say, hey, we're ready to talk. This looks really interesting based on everything you're saying. And sometimes it's funny. Like, you don't hear anything from that person, and then 5 months later they say, hey, we're ready to talk, and they just reach out to you out of the blue. But that content that you sent 6 months ago, it directly influenced that. The timing wasn't right before, but then, hey, something came up, ding, 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 I got this email from Scott, I'm going to give him a call back. Yeah,
that makes sense. Adam, are you using any of the segmentation approaches in order to differentiate what kind of messages get communicated to your prospects? From the sales team, that is. Exactly.
What we've found, most buyers are doing the majority of their research before they even get into our funnel, before we even know their name. So, that can be a little bit challenging, but the silver lining to that is the people who are actually getting into a sales conversation are ones who want to have those conversations, and really your job as a salesperson at this point, and my job as a demand gen marketer, is to arm our prospects with the conversations that they need to take back to their team. So, something we do is based off of what segments that they're in on the sales conversation, we'll send them the relevant case studies for that. But what we also do is we have kind of like an ROI calculator type thing within our company that we actually share with our prospects and say, hey, look, here, you've already bought into the vision, you've already bought into the dream. We want to tell you, here's the ROI that you're going to get if you start using our platform right away. Take that to your team, share it around. And that's been a huge boost for us because all of a sudden they look like the champions. They're the ones equipped with the best information, and we're just the reliable source for them.
Yeah, well, Scott, let me put that one to you, because it seems like what we're hearing is people are less interested in getting data sheets and that kind of classic information, and they're way more interested in getting thought leadership type material. Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, it certainly is. And I mean, like, we hardly send content that, we generate that toots our own horn. We just send, content that thought leaders are providing out there that obviously ties back to how we can help, some sort of key indicator or KPI that we can actually help them increase or decrease. So it certainly does. And just to speak to what Adam was saying, having an ROI calculator, having something that you can show them that's really going to drive home the point is absolutely critical. We have one too. And since we've implemented it, it's just, we're talking about all these decision makers, all these people who are part of the buying process. I think this really just helps, when you could show the ROI and break it down simply, it really just helps speed up the process.
Yeah, and we're seeing that same thing where it's so much around helping the buyer to prioritize the action. And so if you're coming in and helping to show them how they can improve their business, how they can do it quickly, what the return is, basically helping them to build a business case internally. Because really, if you do have 20 people that need to sign off on something, then your champion or your set of champions, they're going back and they're talking to 19 other people, and they need to justify that. So really key that you're equipping them to have those kind of internal discussions. Because when the curtain goes down, you don't know what's happening. You need to make sure that they are, they are properly equipped for having that business discussion internally. So, it sounds, Adam, as a marketer, you're working across sales teams here. So what do you do in order to try and get the right resources that salespeople are actually asking for, or rather that your prospects are really asking for? How do you go about finding what materials to equip the team with?
Yeah, well, I mean, it starts, of course, with the right data in our systems. We got to know who people are in order to know what they want, and then also what are they consuming that's going to be successful. So I know I'm actually pretty familiar with ZoomInfo. I know it's a great data provider, especially for salespeople. Obviously, Sociedo, we do some of this as well. But really, once we can get down to the nitty-gritty of who someone is, once they're in that sales conversation, they're using this software, they're in this industry, they have this job title, they have these responsibilities, this is what's happening at their company right now that might influence their decision. All of those key points can kind of inform then, all right, what resources do we need to really drive home the sales point in the conversation. So, the first places we look are, what are the case studies that we have? If we don't have one, who's a customer that we need to reach out to right now in order to at least get a testimonial, or maybe do a connect call, right? Like a peer-to-peer type call that we can set up. That's always the first place that we go. From there, of course, we have some product feature specific type materials, but more often than not, what we're looking for are, what are the resources that we've published in the past around our topic, from a broad sense, that establish ourselves as the thought leaders. And then, of course, Sociedo is the natural solution to that. That would really matter to their industry, right? So if we've published an article in a Tier 1 publication that talks about how to use Sociedo or social selling from a broad perspective in the HR industry, well, that's something that anyone in the HR industry can take back to their teams, use on it, think, kind of sleep on it a little bit, but really ingrain in their minds that Sociedo is the experts in this field, and so we should be talking to them, of course. So really, but I can't emphasize enough, it comes back to knowing who your prospects are and engaging with them across multiple platforms so you can really get down to the nitty-gritty of what's on their minds right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it has to resonate with that buyer. Scott, do you have like a connection back into marketing where you're pushing your team's feedback and your own feedback back to marketing to get the kind of ROI calculator or success stories or whatever that are going to resonate?
Yeah, I mean, like we're always meeting with marketing. I think that's one of the things that we do really well. So we have a monthly meeting where we talk about what's working, what's not, what we need. Luckily, we have a really good marketing team that's there to help us and build the things that we need. And they, like the first ROI calculator that we did was an Excel spreadsheet, and now it's an actual nice-looking web page, for example. They're nice and pretty. It's something really professional that we can deliver to our prospects.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So I'm going to pause on this section too. This is really helpful. So to me, the big takeaway on this section is, if you've got prospects that are just dying for value in order to prioritize projects internally, you need to be able to equip your sales teams with segmented, targeted material that's going to help them to build a better business case internally. So That's great. Well, let's move on then to third stat here that I wanted to call out, and that's around the buyers that are using the material here. Clearly, there's a lot that are getting a lot of different materials from different vendors. So again, importance of pushing up material to your reps, making sure that they're equipped with that kind of business case material. Let's move on here. The thing that jumps out at me when I see this stat is kind of back to some of your earlier points that you both made, which was around how so many buyers right now are going out, looking at social media, trying to pull out information from thought leaders or people they trust or their peers in order to identify what they're doing next. What some of the things that jump out at me though is it seems like it's going to be there's going to be a disconnect. There's going to be sort of one person on an island. How do you make sure that you're getting enough coverage internally or identifying more than one person as a champion? Are you guys doing account-based type selling when you're doing social selling, or how do you see that account approach?
Yeah, here at Zoom Info, we definitely do an account-based approach. So all of the reps have 100 accounts. And whenever we're reaching out to an account, we're basically never reaching out to one person. If they use Marketo, we have a different message for the person who's actually going to be in Marketo day to day. Then we have messaging for the high-level leaders, and then at the same time, we're also going after the sales professionals to try to understand how they're generating business and if there's a fit there as well. So completely account-based, but if you're hitting one person, it's going to be pretty tough, especially at larger organizations, to give yourself a good chance. Other thing too is that once you've done research on the company and you understand what the company does, you have so much great ammunition, so much great information, material that you can tie back to how you can help them, that if you're just using it on one person, you're really doing yourself a disservice. You've got some great information. You might as well be taking it and applying it to a bunch of people. It's going to really increase your chances of getting that meeting.
Yeah, well, that's right. I mean, you want that resonance, don't you? And you're not going to have that unless you're able to tailor it to the unique situation of that account. And I don't know, Adam, do you see that as well, where the same idea, where if you want to be able to scale, you have to roll things up at an account level. Otherwise, trying to target thousands of people versus targeting hundreds of companies seems like a win. What's your perspective there?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I say we do kind of like a softer version of it in our team. So we divide up our decision makers into 3 buckets at Socito. So we have the the day-to-day user, obviously. Then there's the budget holder, usually the senior manager or director, and then we have what we call the technologist, the person who's going to actually implement our technology at the company. At smaller companies, it might be one person, but at the larger ones, it could be a couple of people fitting into each of those buckets. And so what we do is, from a marketing standpoint, obviously develop the content for each of those 3 buckets. The salespeople have talk tracks for each of those and different demos that they go through. And so from an account-based outreach strategy, really, we try to own it on the marketing side, actually, and that's why, from a lead gen perspective, really what we're trying to do is fill opportunities that have each of those 3 buckets filled for each of those accounts. And so that might be, as much as we can get them into one channel as possible and be efficient in the way we're reaching out to them, that's great. Oftentimes it's coming in through different sources, right? So we might be able to find the day-to-day users on social media, and they might be able to connect with their friends, but the technologists, they might be coming in through an event or a trade show. Someone else might be coming in just through an email or content list buy or something like that. So we have, it can often take a little bit of time to flesh out your accounts, but really once you have everything kind of locked into place, all the decision makers at your company, that's when we start to see the sales cycle actually accelerating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, when you think about social, there's an internal social element to it as well. Like what we see is that if you have if you're contacting one individual, they may think to themselves, well, why am I wasting my time on this conversation? But if they see that their peer is, I don't know, retweeting something or engaging with a prospect's email, or happens to mention that they got some interesting research from a certain company, then you're darn right that first person is going to be much more likely to take a meeting, much more likely to trust that vendor, because they've got social proof. They can see that internally that they don't have to expend capital internally to convince their peers that this is something worth doing.
Yeah.
Now, I'm always curious about the timing aspect of this. So, you may have one person that is out on a research mission right now, and they're looking for material, but you've got other people that are, within that same organization you're targeting as a salesperson that are focused on something else. They got different priorities. Do either of you have approaches to kind of deal with that asynchronous problem where one person's interested, one person isn't, and how do you bridge that time gap?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we always have to be trying. As a sales team, we always have to be going out there and looking for people, and lots of times it's the wrong timing. So even if we can get a conversation, we still want to do it because when the timing is right, or if a need does come up, we want to be the first ones that they think about. So like we with the way we have our outreach program set out, we go all in on people for a short amount of time, maybe a few weeks or a month, where we hit them with a lot of content and how we can help, and then we slow it down. And it's done through an automatic process where we're just delivering them content maybe for another 2 to 3 months before we get back and we get them hot again and stay on them. So if we can get them at the right time, great. If we can't, we'll hope to talk to them. But even then, it's amazing how many people come back to us and you haven't talked to that person, or that person ignored your emails or your calls for 5 months and then just randomly calls you or emails you out of the blue. It happens to us all the time. It's nice, but it was a direct, what we did before when we were constantly hitting them was a direct influence there.
What that kind of makes me think about, Scott, is how much of a partnership social selling is with the rest of the organization. That social selling is not only about a individual salesperson reaching out, but in conjunction with marketing adding value, or marketing doing social media actions that they can nurture people and bring them back in. So in some ways, as a strategy, you'd almost want to make sure that the sales team is working as closely as possible with marketing to make sure that that is done.
Certainly, yeah.
And Peter, I'll just kind of jump in here and say, that's really, to us, that's the importance of champions in the buying cycle. The person who's in our funnel who's expressed interest, we want to make them look as good as possible to their organization. So we'll give them all the resources they need. And everyone else at the org, they're not going to be the ones who are opening our emails or who are getting on the phone or getting into the demos, but they are the people who might start to engage in a lighter touch, maybe consuming some of our content, possibly engaging with us on social media. And so that's why we really like to think about social media as an entire demand gen solution, right? It's not just about targeting people at the top of the funnel. It's, all right, can we get down to the prospect level for each of our accounts during the buying cycle, making sure as many people from that organization as possible are following us on Twitter, consuming our content, retweeting us, or at least engaging with our influencers, etc. Because then you can start to build a social clout that, just like Scott mentioned, over time, now you're on their radar when they are ready. You're the first solution that they can do.
Yeah, that's a great point. So it almost is like you're surrounding the right decision makers internally, supporting them as they're doing that research maybe on their own or partially in conjunction with a sales cycle. But I guess surround and support might be a nice way to kind of summarize that. Well, terrific. Let me just go on then to the final section that I was hoping to discuss, and that's around measurement and analytics. I think one of the great things that's happened to sales and marketing as professions over the last 10, 15 years especially, has been that the ability to measure ROI. And yet still we see this stat here where 3/4 of companies don't have a strategy for measuring the effectiveness of social. So if you were to look at how you measure success, Adam, maybe we'll start with you. How do you measure what is successful social selling?
For sure. And let me just reiterate, this is kind of a scary number. 75% of people can't measure the success of social. And yet we did a research with Demand Metric a while ago, and we found that 66% of people are still, organizations are still going to invest in social next year. So a majority are still investing in a channel they have no way to measure the success of. So that's a little bit scary, but thankfully there are ways to do it. Really, when we talk about social, we want to get down to ROI, of course, and we want to get down to the lead level, right? So too often we've taken social, just put it at the top of the funnel and said, here's our engagement stats. Let's look at click-through rates. Let's look at follow-back rates and hope they increase over time. Really, we need to be connecting social all the way down to the conversion point in the funnel. So that starts with how many leads am I generating, who's in my funnel that's coming from social media. So there are a lot of tools that can help you do that. If you're using a tool like Hootsuite or any of those social media management tools, they even have some basic solutions that allow you to do click tracking. And once someone's in your funnel, you can attribute them back to a tweet or a certain campaign and say, hey, I sourced this person from social media. Now this deal is attached to social. That's a great way to get started. What we do at Socito with our own platform is we actually connect on the lead level, and we say this individual person got into my funnel from this keyword by tweeting this or interacting here. And so now I can actually attribute down to the actual message that I sent out, not just the tweet or the campaign, and I can generate leads that way. But really, of course, you want to get down to ROI as well. So it's not just how many people am I interacting with from social, but what deals are closing too. And so something that we do is that we actually do a first touch and a last touch kind of model here at Socito. So we say, how many people did we generate from social? That was the first time they talked to us. We actually generated that lead from Twitter or from LinkedIn and got them into our system. So we contribute all the revenue we close from that back to that first touch. And then what we also do is we take everyone who interacted with social media across the buying cycle. And we measure that against email. We measure it against anyone who interacted with the webinar or visited our website or got on a phone call, any of our different channels. And we say any touch point that they had from social media, we're going to attribute revenue to that. And then we can start to do weighted averages against our different channels and say, social brought us in 22% more revenue than email engagements in the past month. So that's really the level that we get down to. We do that even through the sales cycle. So, every message that a salesperson is sending out, we're tracking that through Salesforce and through Marketo as well. And so, I know not every organization is set up to do kind of that level of ROI tracking, but really it starts with at least who am I getting from social media that was their first touch. And that's something as simple as a unique URL link in your social tweet that you can at least be tracking.
Yeah, I love that idea there, the focus on tying it back to revenue. Scott, when you have a large team that you're running, when you have one-on-ones with your team, how do you give feedback on what's successful for them or how they could improve their social selling? Or do you use any kind of measurements in that sense?
Yeah, I mean, like what I look for is how many people are they adding every week to their funnel, and it usually all starts from a social network, understanding what that person does. So how many new people are they adding to their funnel, and how many are they converting? So we're constantly keeping track of what they're converting, what campaigns that we're running are actually working, what keyword indicators within these people profiles is really giving us the biggest return on our time. That's what we're doing. So I couldn't say that I necessarily track our social strategy. It's probably more so for our marketing team. I'm sure they're doing it. But we are tracking how things are working constantly, what people are working, and I think it all stems from how we're building our list, how we're finding the right people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's great because, I mean, the more that you do that you tie that revenue attribution back to those earlier steps, so which messages are being communicated, which people are you contacting, I mean, that's going to guide your strategy, and you're going to just continually refine and focus on the messages, the people, the segments. To me, that feels like that puts a good summary on that fourth element I was hoping to discuss, and that's just the importance of measuring it. It is basically a science in some ways, and we can continually improve how we're selling in order to get that edge and help your teams to come around to be more effective social sellers. So I guess if I were just to move ahead, and I guess these are the primary takeaways that I took from this discussion. The first one was identifying who in the organization that you're going to be targeting and which organizations you want to prioritize. So we talked a little bit later about account-based selling or named account type selling, where you're identifying which accounts make the most sense to focus on, using demographics or behaviors in order to identify which companies make the most sense for you to reach out to. So looking at their social media presence, their activity there, picking up signals about what they're doing and what they're interested in order to focus on them. Second, matching that value, the matching value that you can provide uniquely to that prospect. So not elements like data sheets and the like, unless they ask for them, but focusing on what kind of return on investment calculators or some of the other business case material that Adam and Scott brought up, ways that you can add value to those prospects that you uniquely can do and increase that trust level. The third thing that jumped out was around that surround and support. So that was the idea that it's not going to be just one buyer internally, but how do you help support the process and support your buyers by identifying who is the correct contact and who are the various influences internally. And then lastly, measuring that success, so identifying what's working, how you can improve the process over time, and then just continually iterating on that. So with that, I'm just going to pause, and there's some questions that we've been getting through Twitter and some of the initial registrations. So if you don't mind, Adam and Scott, I'll just pivot over and throw out some of the questions that we've been picking up, if that's okay.
Sounds good.
Sure thing.
Great. So I'll throw these out, and you can jump in, whoever would like to take that. First one I see is, what are the most important things I can do to train sales reps for social selling?
Yeah, it's sort of hard to say. Yeah, it's sort of hard to say what you can do to train them. I mean, I think like sales reps, they act in their own best interest. We all do. They're hope the good ones are motivated to be successful, make a lot of money. I think they have to see that it works. So the way it's worked here is the people who have adopted it are usually the ones that are setting up the most meetings with high-value prospects and closing the most sales. And so it's not necessarily training, but just seeing by example. And when their peers are doing really well, they're going to adopt it. Just adopting it just to adopt it is I think it's going to be really hard to teach someone to do that.
That makes sense, yeah. And Adam, any thoughts on that?
I mean, yeah, of course I'll echo that. From our standpoint, obviously coming from a marketing standpoint, I have the fuel to be able to say, hey, look, the leads who are engaged socially are moving 22% faster through the buying cycle, which is true for our organization. And so that there's enough to at least get some incentive, I guess, for the sales team to start using these social actions and reach out to people socially in order to actually close deals faster. And so that's how we've been able to increase our adoption.
Okay, great. There's one question here. I'm just going to rephrase it a little bit. It's basically saying that this individual works for a B2B company, and they're thinking of social selling mostly from a B2C perspective. So probably thinking about things like cell phone companies or other brands that are more consumer based, and they're wondering is there any kind of learnings that B2C companies have been seeing that would help them as a B2B salesperson? Oh,
go for it, Scott.
No, I was gonna refer to you, Adam. I was gonna say I would have trouble answering this one.
Oh, sure. So we've found that B2C always tends to be a little bit ahead than B2B, and it's definitely held true for social. I mean, really, what we've seen in the B2C world that's worked really well is one, doing this at scale, right? It doesn't work if it's just individual one-on-one outreaches, even though those are important. Social selling has to be fueled by a holistic strategy within your organization as well. Marketing needs to play a part in it. They need to be active on social media. They need to be connecting with people and generating leads from social. From a sales perspective, there should be a process in place and probably a way to automate some initial interactions on social media. And then the other thing that I'll say as well is, again, social media is a multi-touch type of channel, right? It's not just one message and you're done. It's often multiple messages at multiple stages of the buying cycle, and it's going to happen across platforms well. The person that you're connected with on Twitter, if you also connect with them on LinkedIn, you're going to increase your contact rates on the phone by about 30%. What we find, the most successful B2C marketers are taking social across multiple channels and creating a holistic experience for their leads, giving the salespeople kind of a tunnel in order to reach out individually. And so that's what B2B organizations are starting to do and finding success with.
Well, great. Well, there's one more question that I'll just throw out there, and it was from someone who says, we have a smaller sales team. How many sales reps would you consider to be necessary in order to implement social selling? So I guess another way to ask that would be, is social selling only a game for large sales teams, or can smaller organizations take advantage of it too?
I would say one sales rep. I think any size organization.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, you almost see people taking this up. I mean, we're seeing it as a grassroots kind of thing. I mean, I see it where individual reps themselves will recognize the value of it, and in many ways they've been selling for some time, and they're just starting to do it on their own. So, yeah, I mean, I would echo that. Great. Well, that looks like that's the questions that we have. Just want to say thank you to all the attendees that have joined where we are recording this, and we'll be putting it up for easy access through each of our websites, so you'll have access to that afterwards. Really appreciate the questions. Scott and Adam, very, very much appreciate the thoughts and the best practices you put forward today. So appreciate your time, everyone, and thank you very much. Looking forward to the next conversation we have.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.